wanted to talk a little bit about how being part of a guild or a multiplayer experience online can be totally different than what you anticipate it ought to be, and how it can erode from the actual purpose of what gaming should be, which is to have fun and to role play yourself in some particular form as being part of a world that's different than reality. Now, when we talk about people engaging in multiplayer experiences online, we like to imagine that those other people are going to have the same values and interests, and they're also going to be immersed in the world that we're immersing ourselves in while playing the game. And in some cases, that seems to work out pretty well. It works out pretty well if you're playing a multiplayer match of something like World of Warships, or maybe a multiplayer match that's competitive for something like Age of Empires 2. Where it doesn't necessarily live up to expectations is in role-playing games like MMOs that encourage people to imagine that they are a particular character living in a world that's separate from our reality. It's not a competitive experience generally. It's more of a personal experience to be part of this world, to explore and to have an adventure. And the problem with guilds, which of course depends vastly on what guild you're a part of and what sort of people you encounter there. The problem with guilds, though, is that they suddenly shift your obligation from the game to other people playing the game. And instead of being lost in a world that's fantasy and fiction, you're distracted. Your immersion is broken by real people who are doing things that have absolutely nothing to do with that world you're role-playing in. Now, I'm not an extreme role player that never breaks character and does all sorts of crazy things and takes role-playing to a whole different level. And I know there's a lot of people that do that. I'm not really talking about that. I'm just saying, if I'm going to be playing a role-playing game, why would I play that game if I'm not going to think about that fantasy world that I'm part of? And a good way to not be part of that fantasy world is to jump onto a Discord channel and then be hearing a bunch of other people with their profanity and their complaining about what happened at work and what somebody else did, and you're listening to somebody eat noodles and you're waiting for everyone to get on the same page about what they're going to do next. And now, next thing you know, your game experience has devolved into something very much like sitting on a Zoom call at work. And you thought you're going to find these amazing, like-minded people who are going to be kind of sort of in character, and you're going to go explore this amazing world together. And there are a lot of people that are basically like that, but the guild experience quite often doesn't give you that. That's what you imagine it's going to be. In reality, it doesn't really work out to be that way. It winds up being a thing where you start to feel obligated to play the game in a certain way, to play content other people want you to play because you want to be part of the team, or to be logged on at specific times. And then maybe you thought you wanted to log off and go to bed, but that doesn't seem to be what the guild's doing right now. So now it's approaching midnight and you're thinking, well, I guess I'll stay on a little longer then. Well, those sorts of things are immersion breaking, and they're not really positive. So that doesn't mean that I'm anti-guild. I think it's great to be able to connect with other people in the context of being mutually fans of the same game and possibly even doing things together. But you also have to take into account that quite often that experience doesn't work out to be what is promised or imagined on the front side. And if it doesn't, then you might want to consider going light on the guilds and not really being part of one, or being part of one that's more casual and where your name is basically just on the list, and you might chat a little bit back and forth on a Discord or something, but you're not really obligated to do anything formal. That's one reason why I like Elder Scrolls Online, because the nature of the game is designed to where pretty much everything in the game you can do as a single player. You can quest, you can explore, you can find things and craft and sell things and do all sorts of different activities, and you can do it having the benefit of knowing you're part of a shared world where other players are also having those experiences, but you don't have to have those experiences with other people necessarily. So you get the best of both worlds. You can join a guild and you can never talk to anybody in it if you want. Or you could just chat with people socially and maybe on a message board in Discord or something. You don't have to be sitting there in voice chat with a bunch of people doing content that you don't want to be doing. You can do that if you want to, but you don't have to do that. There's not any obligation. And there's a lot of guilds that are just there for the purpose of giving people a place to sell and trade and things like that. So you can actually participate in and support your guild just by playing the game, just by participating in the economy of the game. You don't have to be doing dungeons together or anything like that. So what's good for one person is going to be different for somebody else, of course. But the point I'm getting at here is that a lot of times we really upsell the idea of multiplayer interactions in online games. The idea of live service games is probably at an all-time high when it comes to popularity. But the reality of real people interacting means that a lot of times those experiences don't live up to our reality. And it's important to take stock of that and then find a way to play the game in a way that suits you. Which could mean that you switch from one game to another if the culture of one online game is toxic. That's something I did kind of with Albion Online. I realized Albion Online is a really fun game. I do like the game. I think it's great. The experience I had was great, but ultimately it's not designed to be a single player experience. If you don't play with other people, you really just are not going to have a good experience in the game. You're going to hit the wall and then feel like it's boring. And that's more or less just how it is. But then I also didn't really want that hardcore commitment to doing group activities with other people. I wanted to be able to not have to play with other people if I don't want to play on my terms. And that game just didn't feel like a very good fit. So since I don't have unlimited time to play games, I decided, well, I'm going to switch to one that fits me better so I can be part of a guild and not actually have obligations to fulfill. And that really kind of worked out better for me. Sometimes you have to be honest about the experience you're having instead of being blinded by the concept of an experience that you could have. It's like this survey that I heard was done where people were asked if they support the idea of the rich being able to keep their wealth. And generally, people were really in favor of the rights for people who are rich. And the reason for this is because most people want to have a fantasy that they're going to become rich. And then if they were to become rich, they would want to be able to keep their riches. And yet the reality is that's mostly a fantasy. So people would defend the rights of people who are not part of their class because they like the idea of one day being able to be part of that upper class. They will respect the right to pursue that level of wealth. And even if that meant curtailing something that they could have now, they still would rather have the option to have the wealth later. And it's kind of like that, I think, with guild activities. We like the idea of being part of something, being part of a community, if you will. And so we're willing to overlook the fact that the community we might wind up being part of is not ideal and not really giving us a very positive experience. As with all things in games, in life, if you're not having a good experience, if you feel like it's not really fun and it's not really rewarding, then you should take a step back and remember you're not obligated to do anything just because other people are pressuring you to do it. It's okay to take a break. It's okay to play the way you want to play and to do things as you find them bringing you joy. And if they don't, to take a step back and to just disconnect a bit. Sometimes we get so close to things that we don't have the ability to zoom out and see them from a higher level perspective. And when we do zoom out, then obvious things become painstakingly clear. Like if you're not having fun, then don't play the game. Like, why would that need to be something we cover and talk about? Isn't it self-evident that if you aren't having a good experience with a guild or you're not having a positive experience with a game, that you should just step out? That would be pretty obvious, you'd think. And yet there's a lot of people that are too busy with the promising themselves it'll get good later to realize that they're just kind of wasting their time on things that they don't need to. It all boils down to looking at the fruit that's borne by something. And if it bears good fruit in your life and you enjoy it, then do more of it. And if it doesn't, then don't be afraid to take a step back and find something else that suits you better. Guilds, they can be great, but sometimes you're better off, even in a multiplayer game, to have a curated positive experience, which might be a bit more of a solo one as well. Feel free to share your thoughts on guilds and whether you like to play single player games more than multiplayer ones, or if you like to play MMOs as a solo player. Love to hear your thoughts on it. Till next time, thank you for watching.